What's going on, y'all? My name is Sean, host of the Sensibly Cynical podcast. On today's episode, I will be joined by Josh from the Still Loading podcast. I am so excited to bring him back on Sensibly Cynical. Today's topic will be underrated video games. He sent me a list a while back, a list of 5 games to be exact, from all different consoles, okay? So it could be a game from PlayStation 3 all the way to NES. So I'm excited for this. He knows so much about video games that it's kind of unreal. But it is time for my interview with Josh from the Still Loading podcast. All right, everybody. With me on the line from the Still Loading podcast, Josh, what's up, man?
Hey, Sean, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, bro. How's everything going over there?
Everything's good. Just tired. I was telling you off mic, I just became a dad a couple months ago, so that's the reason why we're recording so late is because my daughter goes to sleep about a half an hour ago, and so this is the only time I get to myself, so it's either recording podcasts or editing podcasts, 9 p.m. or later every weeknight. Oh, actually, pretty much every night.
Well, yeah, anything for you, Josh, anything for you.
Well, thank you for being so accommodating.
So we're going to talk about underrated video games tonight. So Josh, why don't you tell the audience the 5 games that we're going to talk about?
Sean, you asked me to pick out 5 of some of my favorite underrated games. Also, you can consider them hidden gems, if you will. The 5 that I sent to you for us to talk about are all generations. We have Kabuki Quantum Fighter for the old school original Nintendo. We have The World Is Not Enough for the Nintendo 64. We have Metal Arms Glitch in the System for GameCube, Xbox, and PS2. We have The Unfinished Swan for PS3, PS Vita. Actually, wow, it's for a lot of shit. And PS3, PS4, PS Vita, and PC. And then Sunset Overdrive for Xbox One and PC.
All right, so we're going to go from oldest to newest. So that would be, obviously, Kabuki Quantum Fighter. Talk about that game. That was 1990. So it was a 2D. Obviously, it was 2D. So what? There was 2D, what was it, side-scrolling, you know?
It's a side-scrolling platformer. It's a ridiculous premise. You play the persona. You adopt the persona. I'm reading this straight off of Wikipedia just because it's so concise on there, man. You adopt the persona of 25-year-old Colonel Scott O'Connor, a military agent who has transferred his brain into raw binary code in order to combat a rogue program in the main defense computer. When O'Connor enters the system, his body forms the self-image of his ancestor, who was a kabuki actor. In the year 2056, a virus has appeared in the main defense computer system of planet Earth and blah. So basically, you play as Scott O'Connor, and you have to defeat this computer virus from Earth's defense computer mainframe, what have you. And the reason I picked this game is, one, not a lot of people know about it. It's a game that, one, immediately stands out to Kabuki Quantum Fighter. Like, who's ever really heard of that, you know? It was published by HAL America, which HAL are the same people who ended up doing Super Smash Brothers and the Kirby games.
Yeah.
So this has just happened a couple of years before. But the gameplay, the weapons that you get to use, there's some ranged weapons, but you also whip your hair almost like a sword. So he'll do a whole, headbang, and he'll whip his hair to destroy the enemies. And so he'll just headbang his way through the enemies.
There's a boss at the end of each level, right? It's this level fighting game.
It's a very stereotypical, a very standard fare of 2D platformers. The graphics for the NES are beautiful. Like, I know some people think, how could 2D look good? NES 2D, if done right, looks phenomenal. Like Shovel Knight, if you've ever played that, that's a newer game. That's not underrated. That's a super popular game.
What makes this game underrated, do you think?
Not a lot of people know about it. And so also, I feel like the title alone underrates to people, because who in their right mind would be, like, imagine you're a kid in 1990, right? 1991 is when it came to North America.
Yeah, I was 4.
and you're like, all right, I want to go buy a new video game, and you see a game called Kabuki Quantum Fighter, something you probably can't even fucking pronounce, and all you see is a picture of a dude with red hair, and there's like a random picture. Like, if you look at the box for this, there's like a dog jumping out of a picture at the dude with red hair. I actually like the artwork, but it probably, most kids in 1991 would probably not be interested in this. So I feel like the name itself makes it underrated. Those who do play it, as from what I can tell, seem to like it. It's a really fun, like the platforming, the controls are super tight. The platforming mechanics, there's like moments where like there'll be platforms that your guy will jump and grab on with his hands and
right.
somersault up above the platform to land on top of it. There's some really fun, almost like I can't really describe it. It's a jumping mechanic where you loop up and around to go on top of a platform. So it's a really fun game. It was, like I said, it was published by HAL America, which people should know from other stuff. And it's super fun. There's a boss room at the end of each level. O'Connor uses his long hair and chip-based weaponry to attack enemies inside the computer. The chip weaponry includes an energy gun, a fusion gun, quantum bombs, and a remote-controlled bullet.
Yeah, so it's like a virus, right? They're trying to.
We really play fast and loose with the idea of a computer virus.
Yeah,
it's pretty much this really tech-based looking world, like wires and shit everywhere, and then all the enemies are just real-looking things, like you'll fight dogs and stuff, even though you're in a computer. It's kind of like Tron, but it's not Tron.
Yeah, I was too busy playing, Mario and shit, man, to play Kabuki.
Dude, the only reason I even heard about this is from another podcast called Retronauts, and fantastic podcast where they've talked about it. I was like, Kabuki Quantum Fighter, and I was at a game store. I actually have a copy. Like, I could show you my Kabuki Quantum Fighter cartridge right now. I found it at a game store. I was like, oh, this is what they talk about at Retronaut. Let's give it a shot. And I think it's super fun.
When you sent me the list this week, I was looking at that. I'm like, what the fuck? like, what's this guy talking about, man?
It's one of my favorites, even though I've never beaten it. I've gotten pretty far. Some friends and I, before COVID happened, we would do retro game nights where we would play.
Oh, that's cool. Old games?
Oh, yeah. We would bring old school consoles together. And some of us, my one friend has a really fancy upscaler, so that way when you play your retro console on an HDTV, it doesn't look like shit. Excuse me, and it also doesn't play like shit, which is super handy. That's a tangent for another day. That's a lot of like very nerdy stuff that I don't know if you'd be interested in. But we played it the one retro game night, and we got pretty far. We got like 4 or 5 levels in. It gets super fucking tough. It's a tough game, but it's a lot of fun. I definitely recommend checking it. I mean, all of these I recommend checking out.
All right, so anything else you want to talk about this before we move on to the next one on our list?
No, I'm good whenever you are, man.
All right, so the next one was 2000. What's the James Bond first-person shooter?
Yes, it is. It was not developed by Rare, so the company that made GoldenEye for the N64, the one that everyone knows and loves. I'm not taking it.
By the way, let's say the title of the game, World Is Not Enough, right?
The World Is Not Enough, based off the Pierce Brosnan. The reason why this is an underrated game is because everyone always talks about GoldenEye and not this one. The only reason I even know this one, I like this one more, is because part of it is nostalgia, because it was the first one I played. I played GoldenEye after this.
Mm-hmm.
But compared to GoldenEye, World Is Not Enough actually had computer bots. Like, you could play.
Right.
It wasn't just. Like, if you were playing GoldenEye, you're pretty much fucked unless you had 3 other friends to play with you. With this one, you could play by yourself and play and put in computer bots and set their difficulty, and then you could run around and, like, there's a lot of different variety with all the different game modes, creative liberties with the story of the movie, and added some levels that don't quite make sense, but they did that in GoldenEye too. But I just feel like it doesn't get enough credit, because it just lives in GoldenEye's shadow, and it's surprisingly well done considering it wasn't developed by Rare, who made GoldenEye and Perfect Dark for the N64. It's developed by Eurocom, which I don't know much about them, but it controls like GoldenEye, so like people who like GoldenEye's controls will like these. And multiplayer, I honestly feel like it's slightly better, only because it had more options than GoldenEye. Now, admittedly, GoldenEye came out a couple of years before, so they learned from that. But yeah, it's a really fucking good game, and also it's a James Bond game. James Bond games are awesome. I don't know if you heard, dude. The company who made the new Hitman games, IO Interactive, they're making a new James Bond game. And like, there's not even a release year like set, so we have no idea when it's coming out. But they announced it earlier this year. They're making a James Bond game, and I can't fucking wait. It's gonna be so good.
Yeah, I like this pick here because I remember, everyone. I remember playing GoldenEye, and everyone was huge on. I played that shit. When I'm like the most novice video game player maybe of all time. Now, if I've played a game, that means it made it. I like this pick here because you're right. Most people like myself only heard of GoldenEye. This is a good pick. Was this like a really hard game to play?
It was. I mean, from what I remember, it wasn't that hard. What I did like that was different from GoldenEye, because that's what it's always going to be compared to GoldenEye. So let's be real. This game had gadgets where, like, so for example, your watch. You always had your watch on you. Your watch could either shoot an electric stunner, or it could shoot like a laser beam, or it could shoot a grappling hook, and you could hook into certain areas and climb. And then like a rope would drop down, and you would climb up. But it was fun because what you could do is, if you wanted to play the game without killing anyone, you could technically do that. You could use the stun gun. You could use like the electric stunner, and you just keep stunning the enemy, and they're just standing still, and you just walk up and punch them in the face, and they're down. It's great. And this game had stealth levels. I vividly remember there's one where you have to sneak out of a villa in the middle of the night, and you have to like get specific intel from different offices around the villa grounds, and you have to sneak into a car and get into a trunk, and that's how the level ends. But I remember being really hooked on the game at that point because I hadn't played any stealth games to that point, and GoldenEye didn't really have much stealth. And once again, not knocking GoldenEye. GoldenEye is infinitely more important than this game because it was the first first-person shooter that worked on a home console and did multiplayer on a home console for FPSs. But I love this game. It's super fun. It feels like a slightly more refined version of GoldenEye, which is why I like it more. But I honestly have to go back in and really replay the whole thing to give you a full like breakdown, like comparing the two.
Yeah, so that's when that whole thing was. That's when that was like majorly popular. That whole vibe there, I think the next game on our list is kind of weird. Metal Arms Glitch. Was that a robot? Glitch is a robot?
Yep, Glitch. You play as Glitch. So this game is super underrated because no one fucking knows about it. But it sucks too because Blizzard bought up the company that developed it. So we're never going to see it. Like, we're never going to see this game come back or get re-released in any way because Blizzard's just this thing that exists. But Metal Arms takes place in the fictional universe. You play as a robot named Glitch. He's found in a scrapyard because the whole planet is like a scrapyard, right? Mm-hmm. So he's found in one of the many scrapyards on the planet, and he gets woken up, and he finds himself in the middle of this civil war between the droids and the Millbots. The droids had a guy, basically the leader of the Millbots, they're the evil ones, that is General Corrosive, and the droids are the good guys, and he's just found himself in the middle. So you're trying to help the droids, obviously, because they're the good guys, and you have to take down the evil General Corrosive and whatnot. So the reason why this game's actually really good is a third-person shooter. It's funny as hell. Like, one of the funniest games I've ever played. They drop so many F-bombs, but they bleep it out just to see if they can get away with it. It's funny as hell. Like, it's definitely worth checking out. Basically, you play as Glitch, like I said, and what's cool about it is that there's a shitload of different weapons, and then you can upgrade those weapons. But the way it works is that since he's a robot, he literally just pulls off the weapon from his arm and sticks it in his backpack, pulls out another weapon and attaches it to his arm again. Like, it's almost like Mega Man.
Yeah.
You get like rocket launchers, you get sniper rifles, you get machine guns. They're all called different things because it's like a spew is a machine gun, but they call it a spew. Shit like that. Things that exist in their world, in the droid's world or whatever. But what's funny about it is, like, when you fight the Millbots, they actually program like location specific damage. So let's say you want to be a dick and you shoot a Millbot in the arm a whole bunch, you can blow off his arm and he'll just be running around without an arm. Or you can shoot off both arms and the robot will be just running around with just the chest and the legs and just kind of staring at you. And the only thing they can really do is they can kick you. Sometimes they will hurt you by kicking you. Sometimes you can blow off everything except the legs, and you just see a pair of legs just running around the level.
Yeah.
And the legs will try to kick you. Or you can not, shoot the arm off. You can just fuck it up a little bit, and now it can't control it anymore. So its arm's going all wonky, right? So if say the guy has a rocket launcher, he can't control where he's firing. He's literally just staring at you
yeah.
over the place. And sometimes, since he can't control it, he'll shoot it right into his feet and blow himself up.
Really?
And there's tons of different weapons. You actually get a gadget later on called a control tether where you can shoot it into enemy robots and take over them. And you can control them up to a certain distance away from where your body is.
Right.
So you literally just kind of teleport yourself into the enemy and you can control them. You can go stealth for a little bit and sneak behind enemy lines. And they don't bother you until you start shooting them. It's a really good game. It's funny as hell. It does not get nearly the credit it deserves. And there's multiplayer, which is actually pretty fun. It still looks pretty decent for a PlayStation 2 era game. It doesn't look atrocious. It's really good, and I definitely recommend anyone giving it a shot. It's so fucking good. I cannot recommend it enough. I could gush about it for hours, and I've done a full episode of my podcast on it. It's an older one; it's a couple years old now, but I did a full episode on this game because I love it so much. It's so good.
What's next? Unfinished Swan? What the fuck's that about? Unfinished Swan, 2012.
That's where it originally came out for on the PS3. It came out for PS
All that.
Vita 2 years later in 2014. And it actually just came out on PC last year, which I did not know, in September of last year.
What's the premise?
It's kind of hard to explain. It's much more of a kid type of game, but basically you play as a kid, a boy named Monroe, and you're chasing, like you said, chasing after a swan that escaped a painting. Well, the way the game works is that the first thing you see, I can't really describe the game other than like the very first area. The game starts and it's literally just white. You can't see anything. It's a pure white screen, right? Mm-hmm. No shadows, nothing. It's just one shape, pure white.
Right.
You hit R1 on your PS3 controller, whatever the shoot button is for the playing on, and a glob of paint comes out, almost like it would be an FPS, and it splatters all over it. And all of a sudden, now you see the frame of a wall because now you hit it with paint. So you have to start going around and shooting everywhere so you can see where you're at. You can see the walls, you can see the hallways. So you are literally painting this world into its existence because you can't see anything otherwise. It's just, there's no shadow. It's pure white. So you have to shoot these paintballs, paint globs, whatever, all over the place so you can see where you're going. You don't see anything until you hit it with this ink glob. And that's why I thought this was because not a lot of people know about this game. The people who made it, though, Giant Sparrow, they went on to make a really popular game called What Remains of Edith Finch, which I have not personally played, but I've heard it's phenomenal. I've heard really good things about it. This was their first game, Unfinished One, and it's beautiful. And as you progress through the game, you get different color globs of paint, and they do different things. Like blue represents water, so you use blue to to make stuff wet for specific reasons to solve puzzles and whatnot.
It can't be that hard of a game to play, though, right? I mean, anyone can play it.
No, it's relatively easy. There is one section from what I remember that was creepy, but it's also been almost 9 years since I played it, so I might replay it and do an episode on it at some point.
How was it received?
IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. Game Trailers gave it an 8.9. Other publications gave it a 6 out of 10 or a 7.
I feel like all those, I did a brief rundown on the games you gave me, and I believe that all those were kind of in the middle. A lot of them were in the middle there.
I feel like Sunset Overdrive, that's the next one. I feel like the Unfinished Swan deserves to be higher than, I think 9 or 8, 8 or 9 out of 10. I think somewhere in between 8 and 9 is a very fair rating for it. Metal Arms, I feel like, should be higher than what it was. I think The World Is Not Enough is right where it's supposed to be at. I'm not going to proclaim it is this
some sort of legend of all legend games.
This one, the Unfinished Swan, I'm actually surprised someone scored it as low as a 6. I think 7.5 is pretty fair too. That's a pretty good score for this. I think it just depends on your what type of games you like to play, because this one is it's slow paced. It's a lot more methodical, so you have to really. But it's short though. It's only 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours long. So it's you're not spending a couple weeks working on this game. You could beat it in a sitting. You want to move on though to our final games.
Yeah, final games. Sunset Overdrive, which was 2014 for the Xbox One and PC.
Yes.
So this also came with what? You could get 7 people. What's this Chaos Squad? What's that about?
Basically, from what I understand, though, what Chaos Squad was that it was basically like you and up to, I guess, apparently 7 players, you would get a series of missions where it was almost like defend the castle type of thing. Like you were given an area to defend, and then you would have to fight. It was like horde mode. You were just fighting waves and waves and waves of enemies, and you had to survive.
This game is just an action shooter, Sunset Overdrive?
It kind of is. It's almost like, what if Ratchet and Clank became M-rated, because that's what this game is. It's like all the sense of humor is like really dirty, lots of sex jokes, lots of like mean jokes at other people's expense. It's funny. It's really funny. But basically the premise is there's an energy drink that people started drinking and it turned them into zombies. So you have to fight them all off, and all your weapons are just shit that you find around. So like you get a record player that just launches records and it decapitates motherfuckers. It does stuff like that. You get like, one of my favorites was you would get like a sprinkler and put a teddy bear on it, and it would spray acid everywhere and just kind of dance around, and it would just melt the zombies in front of you because it was acid. I might actually, just so people can get an idea of it, I'll look up the weapons list real quick. I won't read all of it because that might take a little bit, but it's a really fun game, and it unfortunately did not get its due because it was one of the Xbox One's launch games, and it was really good. It was really fucking good, but Xbox One barely sold in comparison to the PS4. So one of the weapons is you get Captain Ahab, which is just a harpoon gun that you just launch at people.
Captain Ahab.
You get Dirty Harry, which is just a big revolver pistol. You get a thing called Feel the Burn, not Bernie Burn, but like actual burn. It was a flamethrower, short range flamethrower.
What do you think made it underrated in your eyes, like this game?
I honestly think it just didn't get a lot of press because this was a launch game for the Xbox One, and the Xbox One had one of the, I'm not going to say it was a bad launch in terms of numbers, but in terms of public favor, Xbox had a really bad launch because in 2013 when this console came out, it was late 2013 when PS4 and Xbox One came out, there was a big stink about always being online. So Microsoft basically was going to force players, like when you bought an Xbox One, you were going to get an Xbox Connect with it. And so, the motion the motion sensor,
right?
It would come with a Connect, and you always had to be online, and the console was always listening, so you could say Xbox on, and it would turn on. Now, the funny thing is that everyone just adopted Alexas and, Amazon Dots and Echoes just like a couple of years later. So unfortunately, Microsoft is just ahead of the curve, and it bit them in the ass because everyone was paranoid about it. Which I don't like those either, but it's weird how no one gives a shit now, but back then everyone was like, oh my god, it listens to you to say Xbox on. What else is it going to listen to me say? But now we put that shit in our home all the time. But then also it was always going to be online. It also would not allow you, like if you had a game, right, and you wanted your friend to check out the game and try it, even if you gave them the disc, it wouldn't work. It was linked to your account. So there's a lot of shit, like that is like legit awful. Like that was a really dumb fucking idea. It was game publishers being greedy. But so Sony capitalized on this and said, like, they even made like advertisements of like, this is how easy it is to share games on PlayStation, and it literally had 2 of the Sony execs just hand each other, like one handed them a disc and said, here you go, and just to troll Microsoft.
Really?
So Microsoft really got hit hard by that marketing scheme, and like by Sony, like, just taking advantage of the bad publicity they received for all the different things the Xbox One was going to do. And it was just, they took a lot of hits for it. And because of those hits, the console sold poorly. And this was a launch game. Since this was a launch game with a poorly received system, no one gave a shit.
Yeah, wow.
I gave a shit because it was done by, the developer of this is Insomniac Games, who did the new Spider-Man game, which is outrageously popular. They do the Ratchet and Clank series, which is outrageously popular. They did the Spyro, the Dragon games on the PS1, outrageously popular. They did Resistance on the Resistance series on the PS3, also super popular. Like, Insomniac makes like high-end, like top-tier games. Like, they're up there with Naughty Dog in terms of their popularity. So there's no reason this should have been overlooked as much as it did, but it got overlooked because it actually came out a year after the Xbox One launch, so maybe it wasn't a launch.
Oh, the graphics obviously were really good, I would assume.
Yeah, the graphics are nice. It's super fun. And it's a great game. Like, it's super fun to travel. Like, you can grind on monorail rails and stuff. So like it makes traveling super fun. You can they give you points and stuff for how cool you can be to jump across rooftops, by doing tricks and all this other stuff. Like there's a lot of character, a lot of care went into the design of this game, and it just got shat on because. Or I shouldn't say it got shat on. It just got because the reviews for it, dude, they're all 9, 8 out of 10s. Like the lowest score is an 81.
What's your thoughts on all those retro? We're talking about retro games. What's your thoughts on the retro games being super popular now? Aren't they all of a sudden more popular than they've ever been almost?
I would say retro game fever. Yes and no. So in terms of the big collector's bubble that burst a couple years ago,
did it?
But right now. Sort of, COVID really upped the prices. Most games for the GameCube right now are stupid expensive compared to what they used to be. But the retro game market has definitely become significantly more popular in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So for those that don't know about your podcast, Still Loading, talk about your podcast, man.
Podcast is the Still Loading podcast. I talk about video games and shit like that. I do retro games, modern games. I do retrospectives. I do interviews. I've had voice actors and composers on. I do weird ideas. I did an episode where I had a bunch of friends come on and we did dramatic readings of video game manuals, which was a lot of fun. Stuff like that. So I kind of cover. I kind of like a grab bag of style of a podcast where it's a little bit of everything. My most recent episode, I did my first ever Q&A. At the time of recording, my most recent episode, I did my first ever Q&A. This Sunday, I'm doing actually a GameCube Hidden Gems episode with the GameCube Was Cool podcast. So I had them on, and that's coming out in a couple days. And so that's pretty much what I do. You can find on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Still Loading Pod on all of them. You can find the podcast itself on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Spotify and places.
All the podcasts. Yeah. All right, Josh. Well, it's always a pleasure having you on the show, man.
Thank you so much for asking me to come back on. You've always been a big supporter of my show.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, there you have it. Another episode of Sensibly Cynical in the books. Breaking news. We just passed 3,400 followers on Instagram. Please continue to support us on that application. We are at Sensibly Cynical Pod, Twitter at Cynical Sensibly, and you can check out our Facebook group. Also, if you could please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, it would be absolutely incredible. Once again, I would like to thank Josh for coming on the podcast today. And as always, please stay safe, mask up, and this time, adios.